Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari A to Z Flashback, a series of explorations of the 150 games that make up Atari Flashback Classics for Nintendo Switch. Today's game is football, just football. That's American football to you and me. And this was a 1978 release by Atari, programmed by Bob Whitehead, who we've come across a couple of times on this series before. He developed a couple of launch games for the Atari 2600, including Blackjack and Starship, and then later went on to produce Casino as well, which was an enhanced version of Blackjack. And then he moved on to Activision as well, where he worked on a whole bunch of different games and had a pretty prolific career. So, football that we've got here came out around the same time as Atari Football in the arcades, but this game is actually much simpler because again it was sort of the early days of the Atari 2600 and developers were getting to grips of what types of games really worked on the system and what didn't. So it's quite experimental in a few ways. It's very simple to play. But to be honest, as someone who doesn't know a lot about sports, that's actually quite appealing to me because it means that I can sort of reasonably understand what's going on in this game. It was well received at the time of its original release and got some good reviews and praise for its action and its two-player mode and that sort of thing. But since then it's come to be regarded as a bit more primitive, particularly because the system has got a lot more sort of more complex advanced sports games on the system as well, which we'll come to in a few weeks when we have to run the real sports gauntlet around the letter R. But that's nothing to worry about for the moment. For now, let's go play football.
Okay, here we are once again with Atari Flashback Classics, and today we're going to be taking a look at football. Football is a two-player only game, so in a short while I'm going to hand over to Future Pete once again, who is going to comment on his experiences playing with his wife, and my wife. But for now, we'll take a quick look at the manual, just to see what this has got to say about it. So, this is an extremely simple American football game. It was a very early game, as we said, 1978, I believe, around the same time as Atari Football in the arcades. So, there's your screen layout over on the left-hand side. So you have 2 players. It tells you what down it is. Tells you whether you're on the offence or the defence by an arrow in the middle of the screen. And there you go. So, the timer clock at the top centre of the playfield begins counting down from 5 minutes. The clock ticks only during play and stops between plays. To press the game reset switch to start a new game. So, orange player always starts on offence. And then this is a game where you have to program plays into your people before you do anything. Now, I talked before back on the Double Dunk episode about how I don't really understand how this works. In this one, I'm almost getting a feel for it. So basically what happens is at the start of each down, is that the right word? I think it is. At the start of each down, both players pick a play from this selection here. So you can see that, yeah, you push a different direction on the joystick and that tells your team to do something specific. So for example, if we look on the left hand side there of the offensive plays, so when you're on offense, if you push up on the joystick, what will happen if you're on the orange team is that the player at the back, because you only have 4 people on each side in this one, the player at the back will move to the left and the other players will all advance forwards. If you push down on the joystick, if you push right on the joystick, then it basically does it in the opposite direction. If you pull back on the joystick, it seems to do exactly the same thing. Very strange. And if you press the fire button by itself, all of your team will advance. Now, the interesting thing about this is that there are 3 ways to play. We're only going to show you one today because the other 2 don't really see the point of, to be honest. But anyway, in game number 1, which is the one we'll be showing you in a moment, use the joystick to control your players. So the offensive player controls only the ball carrier and the flight of the pass or kick. The defensive player controls his lineman, all by holding the red controller button down the defensive back. Now, as this tends to work out it tends to feel more like when you're on defence, you're controlling 3 characters at the same time, because the other ones basically follow your lineman. So, yeah, you will see when we come to play it. In Game 2, when your players are not controlled by the joystick, they will follow the play exactly as programmed. So in Game 1, they'll randomly follow the play. So they might not. They might run off and do something completely different. And frequently do, in my experience. And in Game 3, what you do is you program in your offensive and defensive plays and don't control the players at all. So if you're playing in that mode, it's theoretically a strategy game. But since each player only has 5 different plays to use, it's a bit of a crapshoot as to whether or not anyone is going to ever score any points in that mode. So yeah, like I said, we played Game 1 in just a moment. And that's about it, I think. This is an alternative version of the manual we've got here. Again, that's just telling us exactly the same information, I think. So, yeah, not sure why there's 2 scans in the manual here. I guess there were 2 separate releases of this program. It looks like this first one here was a sort of folded leaflet, whereas this one here is an actual booklet. Yeah, so this is a really simple football game. There's no sort of complicated rules or anything like that. All you do is you get a touchdown by getting to the other end of the screen from where your team starts, and you get a safety if you tackle the opponent behind their goal line. So there's only 2 ways of scoring points in this. There's no field goals, there's no however else you score points in American football. I don't know. That's all you have to worry about. So yeah, like I said in the intro, this game is regarded as a bit simplistic these days, but for someone like me, that actually kind of works in its favour because it's easy to understand. I kind of get what's going on in this game. I mean, that doesn't really mean that it's a good game. But at least I understand what's going on. So, with that, I'll hand you over to Future Pete, and he will tell you all about his experiences playing 2-player. So, see you in a moment. Okay, here we are with football. I am in the orange, and my wife Andie is in the white. And so, the game begins with a whole bunch of flickering. With a lovely run from me all the way down the outside for an immediate touchdown. As you can see, this is an incredibly simple game. So, like, even if you don't have a particularly strong grasp of how American football works, you can probably get an idea for how this works. So you see, we've both got a touchdown already, and that's like 20 seconds of the game have unfolded. So, as we talked about when we were looking at the manual, this game unfolds in 2 distinct phases. So, you have this moment here where both of you select a play by pushing a direction in the joystick or pressing the button, and that determines both the formation of your men and of what the men that you're not controlling will end up doing. So you can probably tell from the movements which character we are each controlling. So in this case, Andie has the ball and she is controlling the white dude down at the bottom. But I scored a safety there by tackling her when she was in her goal area. So that gives me an extra 2 points, I believe. I'm now controlling the guy with the ball. And Andie is controlling the 3 players and has tackled me just by walking into me. So yeah, this game really is that simple. It's just a case of getting the ball, walking it down to the goal line of your opponent, and if you're on defense, then you're just trying to walk one of your men into the player who's got the ball. It's all pretty straightforward. So the only thing I'm not sort of 100% on, as with other sports games, as we've discussed before, like when we looked at Double Dunk, the only thing I'm not 100% sure on is when and why you would use the different plays. I know this is a big thing in sort of American sports in particular, but it's not something I've ever been taught. And even in the case of early games like this, if you look in the manual for football, as we did at the start there, it doesn't really tell you what value these players have. You saw that you do actually have the possibility of throwing the ball as well by pressing the fire button. And when you do that, you can actually direct the movement of the ball in the air, a bit like you could in those early Atari sports games, like Atari Baseball and so on. And so you can use that to get it further down the field or past your opponent's defenders or that sort of thing. So, yeah, some potentially interesting things you can do in this game. But when we were playing, it felt like you could only do that with certain plays. Like the play you get if you push up on the joystick seemed to be one where that was possible. But other ones, it just didn't seem to work at all for some reason. I'm not sure if that means that you can't do it on certain plays or if we were just doing something wrong. But, yeah, as you can see, at this point in the match, we were sort of experimenting with plays and interesting things were happening. So there, for example, I inadvertently passed it to one of Andie's players, which meant she took possession of it and then promptly didn't know what to do with it. So, yeah. Now, you can see here a bit of a problem with the play system, which is that the characters you're not controlling often bugger off and do their own thing, or they just follow the play so resolutely that they end up just wandering off into the corner of the screen. Which is exactly what happened in that previous play. They just buggered off into the corner and didn't do anything. And that happens quite a few times in this game. It's always quite amusing to see, but also a little bit frustrating for the player whose players end up doing that. So there again, for example, all the group of 3 players on Andie's team all went running off into the corner. She did still manage to score a touchdown while that was happening, but yeah, you feel they could be making a bit more of a contribution to the team effort as a whole. But the other thing you notice about the game is that it very much captures the rather stop-start nature of American football as a sport. Whereas you compare it to something like soccer, which it does stop now and again, but nowhere near as often as American football does. And so in this, it kind of means you end up having quick bursts of action that last for sort of 3 or 4 seconds at a time, and then a bit of thinking, a bit of downtime, a bit of pushing a joystick in a random direction and hoping something interesting happens, and then repeat the process, running around your opponent. Now there you see, actually, that was actually quite an effective play because my 3 players were completely blocking Andie's player from moving and coming after the guy who had the ball. I'd love to say that that was deliberate, but it wasn't. So, and there you see, half my team goes off into the corner, leaving Andie a completely clear field to run all the way up and get another touchdown. So, yeah, make of that what you will. As I say, this game is extremely simple, yes, but I don't hate it. I don't hate it as much as I thought I was going to. I'm dreading all the sports games on this compilation for various reasons. Mostly the sort of slight awkwardness of having to just chuck it away. Who needs it? Yeah, mostly the awkwardness of having to sort of set up some form of 2-player session, and because at this point, with everything going on in the world, the only sort of reliable opponent I can get is Andie, and I know she's not a big fan of this kind of game either, so I feel a bit bad having to rope her in all the time for the 2-player only games. But this one I didn't hate. I mean, it's not an amazing game, it's not a very complicated game, but again, it's a competitive 2-player game, and we've talked about this a few times previously, as a means of kind of facilitating fun with people you're hanging out with. This isn't awful. It's easy to understand. It's easy to control. Like I say, even the fact that it involves plays, selecting plays and so on, that doesn't seem quite as insurmountable an obstacle in this as it does in a lot of later sports games, or as it did in Double Dunk. So I was actually very pleasantly surprised with this. I mean, I don't know if it's something I'm going to return to all that often, There you can really see the ball being steered by me there. That was the point in the match where I realised you could actually steer the ball after throwing it. I was like, look, you can make it go wibbly wobbly. But yeah, as I was saying, I'm not sure this is a game I'm going to return to, or something that I'm particularly going to make a point of trying to play with my friends when we can actually get back together again. But it's something I'll definitely consider now a lot more than I would have done back before I gave it a proper chance for myself. Another safety for me. And that's one of the reasons I started doing this series. Because there's 150 games in Atari Flashback Classics. And it's very easy to look at the list and just think of certain ones and think, oh, I won't enjoy that, so I won't bother giving that a go. And so part of the reason I wanted to do this series was to give everything a chance, because there are probably going to be some surprises in there. I already know there's a few surprises in here that I've already had previously. So there's a series of games called Real Sports that came out a little bit later in the 2600's lifespan and crossed over a bit with the 5200 as well. And there's a game in there called Real Sports Soccer. Now, I'm not a fan of soccer, football, whatever you want to call it, at all in reality. I hated it back at school, and I've sort of really hated it ever since. But Real Sports Soccer is really, really fun in two-player, because a bit like this is only a very loose approximation of how American football works. So too is Real Sports Soccer. So too is Real Sports Soccer, because, yeah, there you go. But we're about out of time for now, so I'll just say, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. New episodes of Atari A to Z are on Tuesdays and Atari ST A to Z on Thursdays. Check out atariatoz.wordpress.com for a full archive. Do please also check out my other projects moegamer.net, where I explore Japanese and Japanese-inspired games from yesterday and today, and videopackgames.wordpress.com, which aims to catalogue the small but well-formed library of the Philips G7000 Videopack computer, also known as the Magnavox Odyssey 2. You can also support my work on Patreon or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.